powered by Riverside.
Alright, so it's going to be a big welcome to everybody to the podcast. This is
Professional.
Thank you very much. This is technically episode 1, but it's probably going to be released as like a few episodes down the line. But welcome to everybody. This is Chai for Change, where we're going to be once again not having chai, but talking about change. So I'm your host, Shub. I'm a coach, I'm an emergency physician, and I've got an interest in innovation and quality improvement. And today I've got with me our very special guest, my wife. The wifey. She's pizzazz. She's an orthopod. Her name is Shiny. We're both also IMGs, so we did medicine in India and then we came to the UK. And today we're going to be talking about this transition that you've gone through. How's Reg life going?
Well, this really sounds like an interview and so formal. I wasn't ready for such formality. That's a very loaded question. Like, let's be a bit more specific. What do you want to know?
You're 2 weeks into it now. How's it feel?
Well, for me, I think it was a bit, it's not exactly a big transition because I've done the red job before. So I've had 2 years of being a trust grade. Well, 1 year stepping up on the reg rota as a co-trainee, and then the second year as a trust grade reg. So I'm used to the role, which makes the whole ST3 jump much easier. But for people who are not in medicine, I think it's fair to explain what we're talking about because it all sounds French, right? ST3, reg, what does that mean? So what does it mean? That's a question for you, sir.
Yeah, so that's a good point. I guess I'm assuming most of our listeners may probably be in medicine, but essentially in the world of medicine in the UK, you've got a couple of different tiers of experience. So when everybody finishes MBBS, they're a doctor, and they get a temporary license to practice, then a full license to practice about a year later, and that's when the game really begins. So you've kind of got about 2 to 4 years of what we call a senior house officer or an SHO, and then beyond that, for the next anywhere between 6 to 10 years, is registrar life, which we might call as HST as well, which stands for Higher Specialist Trainee, or SPR, which is a Specialist Registrar. But essentially, that's like a more senior doctor who takes a lot more decisions. And then at the end of that, you complete your training and then you're called a consultant in the UK. And that means that you are the big boss, ready to take on your own service and essentially you're running your own show from start to finish as a consultant, I guess. So let's do a quick outline of this episode today. So we're gonna be talking about your journey, Joe. That's okay. We're gonna quickly talk about like your journey, how'd you get here, why are you choosing to do orthopedics. We're gonna take a deeper dive into transitions and what this transition means for you, what some of the challenges are, and what insights we might have to help other people coming into your shoes. And then we'll see where that conversation goes, and we'll probably end with some key takeaways and some key points on how to win at transitions. So does that sound good to you? All right.
You don't sound like my husband.
Who do I sound like?
You sound like some podcast dude. This is not his normal voice. I'm ready.
Okay. So tell us, how'd you get to where you are now?
That's a very loaded question. But in summary, we came to England about 5 years ago, and we both started in trust grade jobs. I started in orthopedics, you started in emergency medicine, and we stuck with that specialty. I basically took every advice that was thrown at me, even in casual conversation, very seriously. I think to the point where I can quote almost everything that was told to me in my first year. And when I tell that to people now, 5 years later, they're kind of amazed and they're a bit creeped out because there's just too much information that I've recorded mentally. So I took everything in like a sponge. I was very motivated, and I felt like there were so many people. We were living in India, and there were not many women. There weren't any women I knew who were doing this, who were doing orthopedic surgery. And coming here, I was very quickly introduced to a group of women. Remember when Narayan gave us that link to women in orthopedic surgery? And I saw so many examples, and I was like, oh my God, this is actually possible here. And then nothing could stop me. So I took all the advice that I could get and did everything. Literally, like everything anybody like 5 years or even 3 years or 2 years senior to me said, do this and you will get a number. I did.
So just for everyone, just list off all of the jobs you've done since you've come to the UK.
So first year was just grade orthopedic SHO, sorry. Then I did a F2 standalone job, and then I did a CT1, and then CT2, and then a just grade red job, and now I'm doing ST.
Wow, quite a list there. Which one was
Yeah.
your favorite?
Favorite of my just grade SHO job, yeah, that was my favorite.
Why?
I think it was basically when you come from like a state of poverty and then you're suddenly given a lot, like I was introduced to a healthcare system where nobody had to pay. People were actually really nice. Like everything's perspective, isn't it? Like I know people who were in the same environment who felt like it was very harsh and difficult. And I felt like it was very easy because all you had to do was follow instructions and then nobody was in your way. One second. Yeah, and nobody was in your way. So I feel like, so what was the question again?
We were talking about what your favorite
Yeah.
job was.
And then I met many friendly and people who valued me, and that was I didn't have anything to compare to except from India, and it was just a host of possibilities. And I guess in a way, in a very weird way, it was my year out of training. Like I wasn't in a training program, so you didn't have all that pressure of doing these weird tick box exercises. So it was a nice year.
That's really cool. So let's talk about, like, I think what you mentioned so far is two big transitions. One was coming to the UK and realizing that orthopedics is something that you could seriously do. And then the second one is the one you've recently gone through, which is stepping up from that SHO role to the registrar role. So which one do you want to talk about first?
Whichever, like both are quite fresh in my memory.
Okay, so take us back to that moment when you met other women doing orthopedics and you had that realization that, oh, you could do it too. What was happening in your head at that point?
I was in awe. I took a picture with this lady who was one of the first female orthopedic surgeon in the country, and in Royal London, she was the first female orthopedic consultant. And in her job interview, when they asked her if she was sure that she wants to do orthopedics and she can do the job, she told them if they think that she's applying for a porter's job. And I think that's a very legitimate response, having done procedures, have assisted in big ones. I understand that it is a taxing job. I think it's more like a marathon. Like first of all, I saw people who were able to do it who weren't like rugby players. And then when you go to theaters in and out, you realize that it's a bit, technique over strength, but also it's very exhausting as in how long it can go in a day and you have to keep up your energy. So even if you're a power lifter and you can't keep your stamina up, you're of no use. Um, so yeah, so I was very inspired by them. I wanted to be like them. I took a picture of one of them and with me, and that picture's like my phone background at the moment for WhatsApp.
So what sort of changed for you when you met them? What was the thing holding you back that no longer held you back?
My own misconceptions of being a woman and doing orthopedic surgery, and that's what other people told me, that if you want to do orthopedics, you have to be a man and be very, very strong. You need to be very big and tall. I'm like 5 foot, and I sometimes feel like I appear smaller than I am. If you don't see it, then you can't do it. I have a very strong belief. Either you fake it in your head, like you imagine it, but you have to see it. You have to see someone else do it, or in your imagination, you have to like do a vision board. You have to see it. I am 5 foot. I did say I'm 5 foot.
So you met these women and suddenly you could see yourself doing it, something that wasn't happening before.
Mm.
And then so once you started seeing it, what was the next big challenge for you?
Once I knew that I could do it, I think the next big challenge was how well I know I'm here. I know where I have to go, but how am I going to get there?
And that's been a journey, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been a very long journey.
And I think now that I'm thinking about it, looking at you do that journey of coming into the UK and getting into like the whole training system and figuring that out, compared to you stepping up into the registrar role, the second one was a lot faster. Do you feel like it was?
As in, you're comparing stepping up as a reg, adjusting to UK?
Yeah, like you know that whole process of being able to see what you couldn't see before.
No, I think it's the other way around.
The other way around.
Yeah, that happened in a day. Like
Okay.
seeing someone do it and then thinking that, oh, I can do it, happened like in a few hours.
Tell me about how long it took for the registrar role.
I think I've truly got comfortable in a year and a half, I would say, into starting the role.
This is so in your second year of core training, you stepped up.
Second year of core training, I stepped up, so that's first year of being a reg. And then just grade reg, that was second year, and now I'm in my third year. So, like, literally 6 months ago, I felt like, okay, yeah. And the funny thing is that the medical part was like this, like the orthopedic part was not the challenge,
Okay.
which
What
is so
was?
strange. It was just being a boss, like the whole mindset change of like, I always say, from being an information gatherer to a decision maker. It takes you so long to get to grips with gathering the right kind of information because you get trained to gather the right kind of information or anticipate. But rarely people pivot you or shift you into thinking, what decision will you make? I think the whole way you learn surgery is anticipate. That's what they all say. And I think the expectation is that you learn that and then you learn the next role. I don't think everybody takes it in that sense. Like you can get stuck in the anticipation phase and never learn how to actually do the job.
So you're expected to learn to anticipate,
Yeah, with the expectation that as you know, as you're anticipating, you so slowly will build up to actually doing the job because you're anticipating.
but that doesn't always happen. Some people are.
I think then you just get good at anticipating.
What does that look like?
What do you mean?
Like, what does it mean to be good at anticipating but not making decisions?
You can pick up on what people will need and how they like information to be given at what time, but you can socially train yourself to meet expectations of the information you need to give them. But if you're not actively thinking like someone who's making a decision, you can get stuck in that position where you're just gathering information forever for the rest of your life. And I've seen that people get stuck in that SHO job, and I don't think it's like the worst thing ever. Like you can,
Does it work the other way around though? Like, if you start to position yourself as the decision maker in your mind, does that mean that you automatically become good at anticipating and information gathering?
yeah, yeah, but it's about how you phrase it in your head. And I don't think anybody teaches you how to phrase it in your head. They kind of just, everybody just tells you, oh, you knew the next step was going to be this, so you need to keep this ready. You know, you know that in the morning meeting, you need to have the group and save ready, you need to have cross match ready. Start thinking that if you're the one operating on that day, and if you lose a 1.5 liters blood and you can't continue because the HB is so low, they lost so much blood, they need a transfusion, now you're stuck because someone didn't do a group and save, that's why you need it, you know?
So what were some of the things that you did to try and figure this part out?
I think someone told me. Someone told me that you have to become a decision maker. You know, he's like a hand surgeon now, and he's a really nice guy. And he told me that's the difference. Yeah, once you start doing that, then you can start like letting go of things that are not that important in the context.
That's really interesting because so I'm thinking about that time when you met the women and you said, "Oh, I can really do orthopedics," and that was like a sudden shift in perception for everything. But you're right. Like this one was a lot more long drawn, and I feel like you spent intentional efforts in identifying what was the missing bit, what was the next bit, and then you went hunting for like why. I feel like your hunting was unique though. Like I, you don't often see many other people hunting for figuring that out. What was your perspective of the whole situation?
I was hungry. I just wanted to do it, right? Like, do you remember? Like,
Mm.
I was just always. You've been my sounding board from the beginning, so you probably know this the best. But I guess you're asking me this question because the context of the podcast. Um, but I I just really, really wanted to do it. I really, really, I always saw it as an opportunity and sort of kept looking at myself and looking at people who were already there, and I kept like trying to calibrate or measure the difference and see like, okay, I need this. I'm gonna get this. Like for getting into core surgical training or to F2 standalone, I literally like someone said, oh, there's a self-assessment. Printed that out, stuck it to the wall, and literally take things off. And became very militant about it. It has taken over my life, which is why we're doing Warhammer now to like sort of balance all of that stress and like over focus time period in our lives.
Your decision making, in particular, like what does it mean to be a woman registrar in orthopedics?
Oh, I think I speak about the social context. So like once I got into core surgical training, I unfortunately met people who were very traditional. And I was also practicing in a place with coincidentally very traditional patients. And I don't think there's anything wrong with being traditional, but if they haven't seen, if you, it's like what I always say, this is like, it's very easy to point at someone and say like, oh, you're not diverse enough, or you need to be more woke and you need to be more open to other people. But imagine like the general public's response when there is a female pilot that walks in versus when there's an old traditional looking or conventional looking rather person walks in who's not female, not small. There's a different, your immediate reaction will naturally be very different. It's a human response. I don't think people should deny it. I think the problem is when they deny that response. You should acknowledge that response and then say, yes, brain, you're doing that to me, but let's give this person a chance. And unfortunately, I met with a lot of people who did not stop to think about that because they didn't care. And then I had to find out ways to overcome it. I asked everyone. I asked people who were not related to the field, like anesthetic consultants. I asked scrub nurses. I asked ODPs. I asked ward nurses. I constantly asked for even examples like, oh, have you seen a female registrar? Or I contacted female registrars from other subspecialties like general surgery who were very inspirational. And they all said that, you need to stand your ground or you need to learn some. People had different advices. They were like, oh, you need to be more feminine. Some people said you need to be less feminine. Some people said that stay away from the nurses. Someone said befriend the nurses. Everybody said their own thing, and I tried everything. I tried everything. Again, like day one, like for both transitions, I didn't really filter advice. If someone said jump, I would jump. And then it's like it was like it's something really crazy. I wouldn't. I would just do it.
So you tried it first and then saw if it worked or not. You didn't
Yeah.
like think too much about trying to judge it.
No. As you know, I'm not someone who overthinks things, and I like to just go ahead
Just
and
do
do
it.
it. Until like I know there's a big risk, then I would overthink it because I feel like I I feel like people just get stuck in thinking too much, and then you need to just do it and then calibrate because you cannot imagine yourselves in a situation without the external environmental factors. Like that's not something you can imagine. That you just have to experience it.
Quickly going back to like this discussion about why you were reaching out to female orthopods. Like, what's unique about being a female orthopedic registrar or a surgical registrar compared to a male, and why does general advice from other men not work for women most often? But what sort of like unique or different about being a woman?
It's like you're in a man's world. Like this there are about 8 to 9% women in orthopedic surgery. It's like being a female police officer. It's the same thing. Like it's a very masculine environment. It's a very aggressive environment, and by virtue of being so many men, you don't have many women.
Like, someone might say that, like, oh, you've got so many examples of good leadership, good clinicianship, good registrarship around you. Like, so what if they're men, right? Like, what's the difference?
If you are not intentional about it, then you just in a natural, very feminine way tell people, or no, or like how let's not even put feminine, like how I used to talk, but having a very directed voice and being, guys, stop. The patient is bleeding. We need to get this, that. Anesthetic team, do you know what's the blood pressure? Like those are two different people, and it's just the energy. You can't ask um because people are so used to men being in that role and women being anesthetics, I guess. Um, when you're asking for help or you're trying to direct the team, they don't take you as seriously. Or, it's different when a man says, and there's actually a documentary about it. It's called A Thousand Cuts. It's women in surgery in America who have had this experience their entire life, and they've made a documentary about it. There's some good short cartoons you can watch about it where there's a woman who comes in, there's a man who comes in and like it's animated, and there's a man, it's on YouTube, and there's a man who comes in and says, guys, I need like this special retractor. And the nursing team goes like, oh, yeah, you know what you're doing. Here. And then like a female or female surgeon says, guys, I need that special retractor. And then everybody goes like, oh wow, like she's so needy. Or the and then there's another clip where the male surgeon goes like, guys, this patient needs a HDU bed afterwards as soon as possible. Blah blah. And then the nurses go like, wow, you really know how to plan your procedures. And then the same thing the female says, like exact same words, and then they go like, wow, you're just like too bossy. Come on, we're not even there yet. Chill out.
Like, I remember when I was doing my anesthetic assessment, the feedback to me was that, oh, I wasn't alarmed enough about an emergency, even though I declared an emergency. But I
You
mean,
need to sound it.
you have to sound it. I guess, like, both of us emergency physicians doing that assessment had the same feedback. But you're talking more than just like, even if you're doing your bit perfectly well and like for like compared to a man, the perception that people have on a very sort of subconscious level is different. And what do you do about that?
Well, I just asked other women, and I went to the extent where like I asked a lot of women, and then the women in general surgery where it worked. So just where some women changed the way they are, and some women stuck to the way they are, and I think the general surgery environment changed, and they responded well to female leadership. And they weren't seen as a woman, they were seen as a surgeon. In orthopedics, however, that's not that everywhere. So I hadn't seen an example of a female being able to be an orthopedic consultant and being respected and valued and functioning as a surgeon and not having that burden of constantly thinking about how you're coming across and just doing her job. And so I literally Googled like hip surgery of all the subspecialties within orthopedics is seen as like the most macho or big or heavy. Like if you're a woman in orthopedic surgery, you're constantly asked if you're going to do hands or peds. But hips is big, instruments are big, patients are big. And so there are very few women who are doing it. And then I literally Googled female hip arthroplasty surgeon, and there were like 3 or 4 women, and one of them was Miss, who is a very well-renowned surgeon in London. And I saw her name, and like a crazy person, as you know I am, I went through everything. Like I had 10 tabs with her name on it. And I just wanted her email address. And I literally went to this one publication she did in 2003 where her personal email was put because she was probably like a junior registrar, I guess. And then she published this article back, I think, in 2003 or something. And it accidentally had her email address. And I'm like, what am I going to lose if I just send her a cold email? And I just put a subject, cold email. And I wrote like a very emotional email being like, I want to see what a female orthopedic surgeon can do. Like, I want a good example. Like, I just want to see what you're doing, basically. And you do pelvic surgery as well. I just want to watch you. And she responded and she scheduled out like an entire week for me to come and watch her. And that was phenomenal because prior to that, 3 years before that point, I had seen women in a like a conference or a get together saying that they're doing orthopedic surgery, but I'd never seen it in action. And she, took me around. She took me into her theater. She took me into her meetings, and she took me into her private clinic as well. I hope she doesn't mind I'm saying all this out loud. But what what like that did was I was able to see someone who looks like me, who physically is my size, do all the things that people are saying that I can't do or thinking that I can't do. Where when I would reduce a distal radius or a hip or put a hip back in ED, I would be put in a situation where people would stop doing what they're doing in the other cubicles and bring their friends like nurses and doctors to see, oh, look at that small girl putting in a hip bag. And it would be a spectacle, and it made me very uncomfortable. Having seen do it very effortlessly, very naturally, and she wasn't wearing man clothes. She was wearing a dress, and wasn't she had a generally deep voice, but she had really good projection. So, she didn't become overtly masculine. She was feminine, but she was very leader. She was a natural leader. People think of orthopedic surgeons as like this cowboy coming in and just being a maverick, but she maintained the affectionate and the empathetic side of being a woman, which is actually so useful in surgery. I feel like I don't know why it hasn't been recognized as something valuable. Maybe because traditionally we had to do surgeries without general anesthetic, and that required a lot of guts and a lot of machoism and being very bold. And then general anesthetic came, and then we can do surgeries on people when they're asleep. But people still feel like we need to be very bold and like macho. We need to be confident and we need to be decisive, but you can still be affectionate and empathetic while being decisive. But I never saw that combination. And then when I saw her doing it, and I saw her having a private clinic, and I saw her dealing with fellows and registrars and SHOs and just dealing with things in the ward itself and with patients. I saw it, and then I saw an example that I could emulate being.
So again, I guess for like the second time now we've come into the space where you exposed yourself to something different so that you could start being able to see yourself in a different way that you may or may not have wanted to see yourself as before, but like there was like a blockage because you just didn't know what it was. It was like this black empty space that you got an example to use to fill. But how did you translate that into what it is for you? Like you didn't just go ahead and start copying them. You did.
That's exactly what I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wrote down. I came home every day and I wrote down whatever she said
Mm.
on a piece of paper, and I broke it down like in clinic, this is her behavior, in theater, this is her behavior, and this is how she talks. I even bought the same color shoes that she did. I bought the she like reads this magazine called Private Eye, which is very like, I don't know, it's not my cup of tea, but like I bought that magazine. Did
So
not.
that's how you started off, but you're not doing all of those things now.
No, I obviously shed all of that because it didn't serve me any good.
So how do you refined from like doing everything, testing what it feels like, and then how do you decide what to keep, what to leave?
I think it's logical. I know that reading private eye will not make me an orthopedic surgeon, but the reason you do that, I did that because I feel like once I pick up on the small like very nuances, those cultural things about that person or like not very obvious things about that person, I can pick up being them. So I started sitting up more straight just because I saw her. So I stopped slouching. I changed my dress. Like I got you to help me buy more formal clothes. And then I cut my hair. I did so many things and my voice changed. Like she taught me how to project my voice and I started projecting my voice. I became more vocal. I wasn't quiet anymore. I'm quiet now when I need to be. Especially in a new place, I'll be quiet for some time and then I'll speak up. But she taught me how to make a presence and like the room would light up when she would enter and I wanted to do the same where I wanted to have that same presence and I keep refining it. I don't think it's stopped there. Like I keep looking for that. Like if I've heard about somebody who's doing really well in a particular thing, I would just do anything to follow them and watch them and it's just about what's missing. And only when you try doing all of it, then you realize, okay, if I drop this one thing, what's gonna happen? So I realized that if I change my voice back to my mumbly self, and I don't speak fully, and I'll keep my mouth full, nobody will understand what I'm saying, and I won't have that impact. Then I bring that back, and I see like, oh, okay. And this is all written down. Like it's not in my head. Everything's written down.
Don't want to do all of this or really hesitate to even start this journey because they might be worried about being called a wannabe or like a fakeist or not being original. What would you say to that?
I feel like you need to have a certain level of shamelessness to really get somewhere. Or like I don't know, in Hindi we say like being stubborn or being persistent is like the same thing, you know? You kind of have to like shed all of that shame. Like if you really want something, you kind of even if you're fumbling, even if you're doing stupid things, you have to forget about what people are gonna say. And even if they're gonna say it, like there will be a person who will value that integrity of like at least you're not complaining. I always see it like that. Like at least there's nothing worse than being someone who complains and doesn't do anything about it than being someone who's being stupid or silly or making mistakes but is smiling and doing something about it. That's what I would say. You rather I know it sounds so like cliche, but my grandmother used to say, don't do something where you feel like if you feel like you're not going to do something and you're going to have a major regret in your life, it's not worth it. Just do it. But I know I've met a lot of people and people it's easier said than done. I think it's a personality thing. So I appreciate when if someone's scared to do it. But the other thing is that people forget about things. In your head, everybody thinks that everybody's thinking about themselves, but they're not. They're thinking about what other people are thinking. So, so let's say if she thought I was a complete weirdo and decided that she's not going to respond to my mail, which has happened, right? So she's not the only person I mailed, and she's not the only person I reached out to. I have reached out to a few people who I think have blocked me, but like okay, for 10 people who blocked me, one person's like responded, and now I'm here. So people will forget. Like there'll be another person to laugh at. Always, there's always another person to laugh at. You're never going to be that one person unless you do something very bad.
Yeah, I mean, I confess I probably would have been the person who would be worried about how other people will perceive me if I do all of this.
But
But
weirdly, when I met you, I never got that about you. It's very late realization. I always thought like, oh my God, he's so cool. I'm gonna marry him.
yeah, because the opposite is like, oh, you're cool because like you're being yourself. But then like that's the loss, right? And I've learned lots from you to just go and do it because what you gain is constant improvement, and just to be cool, you're losing out on constant improvement in so many other things that you could be. And it's a process of like trying something different and seeing how it works for you and keeping it, and then being fluid about who you are and holding lightly to who you are, I guess. So take us into the the skills of becoming a registrar, and I'm talking about the operative skills in theatre land. How does that change?
So I think I was talking about like information gathering and decision making. I think in operative land, like you grow at your own pace. I don't think I'm like very independent now. I'm kind of like at the early stages myself, so I don't think I have much to say about the operative bit. But you pick up things. It's like a whole another like theater etiquette. There's theater etiquette which is in textbooks, like, oh, don't be an idiot and go and touch sterile things when you're not sterile. Right? Don't like make sure you have situational awareness. All of those things are like textbook things. But then there's like, don't ask questions at the wrong time, which I'm so guilty of. And don't like try doing a small procedure yourself and get someone to assist you. Like, I think my advice is someone who's at a very, very young stage. And if they want to know how to assist better, like do something as simple as a small wound closure and get someone to assist you. And you will realize how annoying the assistant is. Like them breathing is a problem. And once you understand that, then you feel like, oh shit, who are my like consultants or like registrars or others, SHO, like how do they cope with me doing 1,000 things? You know, you're trying to be helpful, but you're not. Be quiet. You know, nobody's told me this, but I've realized that I should be quiet. I think I should. There was a phase when I was in theaters and I would talk all the time. Then I learned to like shut up. Then I would never talk at all. Then someone's like, you should talk more. And then I came back. And now I feel like there's a time and place for everything. And that's situational awareness. And I think some people are so good at it. Like they get it so instantly. Like, oh, this is, you know, like the person's trying to concentrate. This is not the time to ask, oh, what if you got this nerve? I think this is a very personal problem. I don't think it's a very generic problem. But just moving your hands a lot in the field, feel like so learning how to be a good assistant is probably the first stage of being a registrar, to be honest, or like the last stage of being an SHO. Um, but like being really good at it, anticipating things, keeping things ready, then it becomes like a dance, like a ritual.
What like when things go wrong? How do you approach that differently?
In theater, you kind of because you're not the first responsible person, like you're not taking on the responsibility. You want to facilitate what your boss is doing. So you want to make that situation easier. So and mostly it boils down to communication. So they might be panicked to communicate to everybody else that there's something wrong going on. And so you can help that. Or they might be too panicked to give you clear instructions where you need to be like, okay, like for example, in a very given recent situation, we had a bleeder which was really bad. And my consultant panicked and I think they started saying something that was just not related. And then I was like, okay, they're clearly panicking. Like, but that's a bleeder. I need to put swab in, got my diathermy in, and just burst. And I think if I didn't have the experience of having, you know, to deal with the situation, this was not a major emergency, but then I would be panicked too. And I'd be like, oh my God, what's happening? You need to tell me. But you kind of learn to slow down for yourself, like calm yourself down so that you can gather what's around you, communicate that to other people. I think I have been in real intraoperative emergencies. And weirdly enough, you know, then it's the anesthetist basically who deals with these life-threatening situations. Like within orthopedic surgery, it's not the surgeon who's basically dealing with life-threatening situation. Had I been a vascular surgeon, that would be a very different case.
Yeah, like from behind the curtain, there's a very conscious decision that the anesthetist needs to take whether to let you continue operating or to
Oh
tell you
yeah,
to stop.
exactly.
And yeah, it all comes down to like, are you helping the situation or not really? And we just need to pause. So, I mean, we've talked about a lot of transition stuff here. Is there any particular advice you'd have for people going through?
Get a coach.
Okay.
Not because you are a coach, but I think that was life-changing. it saved me a lot of pain. And I can see things that I've learned that had I not learned, I would have been in a lot of pain. And I can see people who are 15 years ahead of me in my career suffering from that same pain that I'm not suffering from anymore because of coaching.
So what did the coach do for you that got rid of that for you?
Well, the way the coaches always describe is they kind of reveal the answer within you. The answer is within you. And very difficult situations and frustrating political situations, work politics, that is a huge part of any field, not just medicine. They just make it easy for you to navigate.
How did they do that?
I think there's so many things. They gave me tools to deal with aggressive people. They gave me tools to be situationally aware. They gave me tools of being overwhelmed because I used to get very overwhelmed in clinic. I don't think this is a female orthopedic issue. This is a pan orthopedic issue to be
Medical issue.
and medical issue. Like someone's picked this career to not have human interaction and just do mechanical job, and you put them in a whole day of clinic having to deal with questions and people, and you have finite social energy, and you put them in all day clinic. Oh God.
It's an example of one of these tools, like the overwhelm one.
She would get me to basically stop. It's so simple. Stop in the day, and even 3 or 4 minutes, just take a pen and do something known as a free writing. So it's 5 minutes of just writing whatever comes in your mind, but you're not allowed to take the pen off the paper. Obviously, for spaces. She had to clarify because I had shown her one of my pieces and she's like, "Why haven't you left space?" I was like, "Because you said I'm not allowed to take the pen off paper." She's like,
How I understood it.
she's like, "No, you can. You just you can't stop. So you need to write continuously 5 minutes." And it just lets you pour everything out. And I didn't realize that I would replay scenarios in my head. Like I had no consciousness of replaying scenarios in my head. I would do it all the time. And I would hold on to negative experiences 5 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour from that point. And only when you write it down, you're like, oh, okay, bye. And then you can actually get rid of it. And then I realized I stopped thinking about it.
Yeah.
It was just a big burden off. And it's so simple. Like I feel like these things are not like, oh, you have to pay £1,000 to get some weird app that tracks your heartbeat and your cortisol level and taps you 3 times and then you're suddenly fine.
But super well done for actually doing it, because most people would be like, I don't have time to sit down and write. Like I've got some, people would say, this is not a priority for me.
Well, then they won't get a solution.
Yeah.
And they're stuck, right? So who's winning?
Yeah, and you probably ended up making more time than you spent on it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Once that burden's gone, then you can focus more on what's happening in front of you. And then I had because I know that I suffer with task switching, she had ways to overcome task switching fatigue and developing a routine and yeah.
Useful stuff. So how did you actually find your coach?
My coach came through my deanery. Yeah, so the person who was responsible for supporting me through my training, she recommended that I do get in touch with a coach, which they paid for, and then I self-funded later.
Yeah. So all trainees have access to coaches, and in fact, everybody in the NHS has some degree of access to coaching.
This sounds like a very long advertisement for your coaching. I have to declare that I have no conflict of interest.
Apart from being my wife.
Apart from being your wife.
Yeah, that's nothing.
And that it genuinely happened. It genuinely did change my life. And I feel like it is a lot to do with finding the right coach as well. You can't just go to any coach. It's like a therapist, but without the psychology.
I'm very action oriented, or at least I like to be very action oriented.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so I guess just sort of wrapping up this conversation, then what's some of the key takeaways, or some really important things that you tell somebody going through a similar transition or any major transition really like you have?
I will sound like an 80-year-old now. You can take the donkey to the water, but you can't make it drink it. And I feel like I've met so many people who are like, "Oh, how did you do it?" And then spend like a long time with them saying, "Okay, these are the things that you need to do. Like, don't waste time making the mistakes that I did. Just do these things, and you'll get through." And what was disappointing is that people would try a little bit and then give up. And I feel like maybe I shouldn't judge them so harshly because maybe they don't want to live the life. Because honestly, like the last 5 years has not been easy for us, both of us. We had to do a lot of sacrifices. We didn't. I have not gone to Scotland and touched Highland cows, and I have socks that have Highland cows on them, and we still can't go see them yet because, like,
Don't have time.
we don't have time. And had I done something that was lighter and not so demanding, I would have probably owned a Highland cow by now. So I respect that this is not for everyone. And to be honest, like the reward is so dependent on your perspective. And I can see more people disappointed with the end result of being a surgeon than being happy. So I don't think this is for people who are not sure. Like there's definitely no glamour in it.
No.
Because don't be disillusioned, you're going to be amongst other surgeons.
Yeah.
Nobody says that to you when you're getting in that when you're a surgeon, you're amongst other surgeons. It's not cool anymore. It's only when we go to this random salsa class and you're like, oh, she's a surgeon. Oh, wow.
But for the
Tell
people
us the
who,
most glorious thing you've seen. Oh my God, like
I always get the question
you do.
about the PR X-rays.
Oh yeah.
X-rays
So
with funny things in there. Yeah, but like for the people who've like decided to commit and are going to take that journey. So whether it's that transition to their first job or to a new country or to a slightly senior level, like what what would you say is the key to their first 90 days?
you just put the answer in there, didn't you?
Did I?
The book First 90 Days.
I mean, yeah, there's a book, but like how do you use that? Like to me, the book highlights the importance of really considering what your first 90 days look like. But for a doctor or clinician, it's different from what the book talks about, kind of in a way. How do you look at it?
But there's a book about it. First 90 Days. I read that book. It's really nice. There's a 10-minute video by Jeff Su that is probably better than the book. And he explains it really well. But I feel like in any transition or anything, I feel like anything you want to do, find someone who's done it and just copy them. And then you will never end up being exactly like them because you'll edit things. But if you find someone and just start copying them, you will get somewhere. It might not be what you want it to be, but it will be a progressive step.
Is
No, but it because if I give someone advice, right? They do not have the same background as I have. They might already have achieved some things that I did not achieve at that point, or they might have some deficiencies that I had achieved. So there's a mismatch. So giving generic advice does not work. What is important is that that individual identifies people they want to be like, copies them, and then keep a very honest log of where they are, what they want to do, and what they want to be, and whether it's matching at all times. So I have an honest log of this for many months and years of constant writing and journaling of where I want to be, how it aligns with how much of my day have I spent in actually working towards my long-term goal. And it's so simple, but like it's so hard to do. You can really slip away and not do any work towards your long-term goal very easily. So I would say that transitioning, finding someone who you want to be like, and then logging those milestones or things that you want to copy or reach, and then constantly auditing them and seeing if it works, if it doesn't work. Do you feel right about it? Do you not? Does it align with you? Does it not? Is it having an impact or not? What works for them might not work for you, or it might work better for you. Like, who knows?
think that's a really nice place for us to wrap up this podcast episode. And to the audience, I'm going to say thank you very much for listening and hope this was really useful. We'd love your comments to try and tell us how to improve this and make this better. There's going to be some show notes, and there's going to be all the resources we talked about, like 1,000 Cuts and Jeff Sue's YouTube video, all in the show notes. And looking forward to your comments. See you at the next one.
Bye.
Bye.